The sheriff's cruiser pulled into my gravel driveway just as the sun was setting over Cedar Falls, Missouri. Through my kitchen window, I watched Deputy Harrison step out, adjusting his belt with that weary look cops get when they know they're about to deal with nonsense. In my front yard, a woman in designer wedge sandals was swinging my own garden hose above her head like she was at a rodeo, screaming that I owed her $15,000 immediately or she'd sue me into bankruptcy. That woman was Tracy Hafford, and this is the story of how refusing a $300 home inspection turned into the most expensive temper tantrum in Cedar Falls history. Let me back up. I'm Derek Lawson, 41 years old, and I manage the local auto parts store here in town. I'm the type who changes his own oil, can rebuild a transmission if needed, and believes that when you sign a contract, you honor it. No exceptions, no takebacks, no crying to mommy when things don't go your way. Tracy Hafford moved to Cedar Falls from some suburb outside St. Louis, 49 years old, perpetually clutching an oversized Starbucks cup like it contained the elixir of life, and sporting a freshly highlighted bob that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. She had this way of talking where every sentence ended with an upward inflection, like she was constantly asking permission while simultaneously demanding compliance. I owned a small property on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a two-bedroom fixer-upper that had been my rental for years. When Tracy saw my for sale sign, she practically sprinted across my lawn in her designer flip-flops, waving a check and insisting she needed to buy it immediately because, and I quote, "the energy spoke to her chakras." During our negotiations, I did what any responsible seller would do. I offered her a professional home inspection for $300 that would check the well, the septic system, the roof, and all the plumbing. Standard stuff in rural Missouri where wells and septic tanks are part of life. Tracy's response still echoes in my mind. She crossed her arms, tilted her head, and said in the most condescending tone imaginable that she knew exactly what she was looking at. Her uncle had built a deck once, apparently making her an expert on all things construction-related. She actually used the words, "Don't insult my intelligence." While refusing the inspection, I tried explaining that wells can be tricky, that the pump was older, that $300 now could save thousands later. But Tracy waved me off like I was trying to sell her extended warranty on a toaster. She signed the ACES sale agreement with a flourish, even initiating right next to the bold text that read, "Seller not responsible for future repairs." 2 weeks. After she moved in, I was grilling burgers in my backyard when I heard the kind of shriek that makes dogs howl, 3 counties over. Tracy came storming across the property line, her Starbucks cup sloshing with each dramatic step. The well pump had died, completely burned out. Any local contractor would fix it for about $1,800, maybe $2,000 if you wanted the premium model. But Tracy didn't want a fix. She wanted blood. She stood on my deck, designer sunglasses perched on her head, and announced that I was personally responsible for a complete water system replacement. Not just a new pump, mind you, but an entire system overhaul that she'd priced at exactly $15,000. When I asked where she got that number, she said she'd researched it online, and that's what water systems cost in California. I reminded her we were in Missouri. She said geography was irrelevant to consumer rights. When I politely declined her demands and suggested she call a repair service, Tracy's face turned a shade of purple I'd only seen on eggplants. She stomped back to her property, and the next morning I woke up to no water pressure. 0. Turns out Tracy had shut off my water line where it connected near the property boundary, claiming she was reserving her legal rights to the shared water table. That afternoon, I found a document taped to my garage door. It was printed on regular copy paper in 72-point Comic Sans font, titled Homeowner's Lien Notice in all caps. Tracy had apparently spent her morning creating this masterpiece in Microsoft Word, complete with clip art of a gavel and what looked like a cartoon judge. The document demanded immediate payment of $15,000 for water damages and emotional distress. caused by fraudulent sale practices. I actually laughed, not a chuckle, but a full-belly laugh that made my neighbor's cat run away. Tracy saw me from her window and came marching over, shrieking about how this wasn't funny and she knew her rights as a consumer. But she wasn't done. When I didn't immediately write her a check, she decided to go nuclear. She found out where I worked and sent my boss an email claiming I was a predatory slumlord who targeted single women with faulty properties. She posted in the Cedar Falls Moms Facebook group that I was running a real estate scam. She even called the sheriff's department, demanding they issue something she called a forced water restitution order, which I'm pretty sure she made up after watching too many legal dramas. The problem with Tracy's Scorched Earth campaign was that I had something she didn't. Documentation. Beautiful, legally binding documentation. I pulled up our original sales agreement on my phone, complete with her digital signature and those lovely initials right next to the inspection refusal clause. I had emails where she explicitly stated she didn't need an inspection because she was, and I'm quoting here, more knowledgeable about houses than most contractors. But the real gift came from social media. You see, Tracy couldn't help but brag about her plan. In that same Cedar Falls Moms group, she'd been posting for days about how she was going to teach that Derek Lawson a financial lesson he'd never forget. How she'd found a loophole to get a free $15,000 upgrade to her property. How men always underestimated her business acumen. Screenshots of those posts spread through Cedar Falls faster than gossip at a church potluck. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors, co-workers, even the local hardware store owner, all sending me Tracy's posts where she basically confessed to attempted extortion. Armed with this evidence, I called my lawyer. Well, technically my cousin Brad, who passed the bar exam 3 years ago, but he was lawyer enough for this situation. Brad took one look at the documentation and actually giggled. He said it was the most open and shut case he'd ever seen. Meanwhile, Tracy continued escalating. She started leaving nasty reviews for my auto parts store on every website she could find. She put signs in her yard claiming I was a fraud. And then came the day she completely lost it. I was watering my tomato plants when Tracy appeared with my own garden hose that she'd apparently disconnected from my spigot. She dragged it across her lawn, screaming that since I'd stolen her water rights, she was taking mine. She actually said the words, "This whole aquifer belongs to me now," while waving the hose like she was conducting an orchestra of crazy. That's when I called the sheriff. Deputy Harrison arrived to find Tracy in full meltdown mode, demanding he arrest me for water theft, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She kept waving printouts of random internet articles about water rights, none of which applied to Missouri or our situation. Deputy Harrison, bless his patient soul, calmly explained that shutting off my water was actually illegal tampering with utilities. Tracy's face went from purple to white in about 2 seconds. She started babbling about consumer protection laws, but the deputy just shook his head and wrote her a citation. The court date came 2 weeks later. Tracy showed up in what I can only describe as her interpretation of professional attire, which included bedazzled pumps and a blazer with shoulder pads from 1987. She prepared a 20-page statement about her victimization, complete with a PowerPoint presentation she tried to set up before the judge stopped her. Judge Coleman, a no-nonsense woman who'd been dealing with Cedar Falls drama for 2 decades, listened to Tracy's demands for about 3 minutes before cutting her off. She asked Tracy one simple question. Did you refuse the inspection when offered? Tracy tried to explain about her uncle's deck-building experience. The judge asked again. Tracy mentioned her research on water tables. The judge asked a 3rd time, this time holding up the sales agreement with Tracy's initials glowing like a neon sign. Finally, Tracy admitted she'd refused the inspection, but claimed she'd been manipulated. Judge Coleman actually laughed. Not a polite courtroom chuckle, but an actual laugh that echoed off the wood paneling. She dismissed Tracy's entire case in under 5 minutes and ordered her to pay my legal fees and court costs. But that wasn't the end. The judge also upheld the utility tampering charge, finding Tracy $200 and ordering her to write a formal apology to the sheriff's department for wasting their time with her forced water restitution order nonsense. Tracy stood there clutching her Starbucks cup so hard I thought it might explode, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. When she tried to argue, Judge Coleman warned her that another word would result in contempt charges. As we left the courthouse, I couldn't help myself. I pulled out the original home inspection brochure I'd kept in my jacket pocket and waved it at her. This could have been avoided for $300, I called out as she speed-walked to her car in those ridiculous bedazzled pumps. The final tally of Tracy's refusal to spend $300 on an inspection came to $8,700. $200 in fines, $1,500 in my legal fees, $300 in court costs, and $5,000 to her own lawyer who she'd hired to pursue her ridiculous $15,000 claim, plus the $600 her neighbor charged to fix the pump, which was all it ever would have cost if she just called a repair service like a normal person instead of declaring water war on the entire neighborhood.